Good, thanks, Sue. So Sue asked about B vitamin testing. Is it necessary? Which tests are the best? When should we do it, etc. And she used folate as an example, as one that is pretty commonly tested, and even more commonly tested is your medical doctor may have run a serum B12 on you. And so these are the two that are most commonly tested. If you've got certain neuropathy or neurologic issues going on, they may test others, with vitamin B6 being probably the next most common in line there. And so, yes, there are times to test these. For example, Sue, if we run a CBC, which stands for complete blood count, this is testing that your doctor runs at your yearly physical for you. So this has your red blood cells, your hemoglobin, your hematocrit, your white blood cells, your platelets, all those markers in it. And if you run that, you'll see, like I said, you'll see red blood cells, you'll see hemoglobin, hematocrit, and then you'll see these markers MCV, MCH, MCHC, which stands for mean corpuscular volume, mean corpuscular hemoglobin, mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration, which mean is average. Corpuscle is talking about the red blood cell, and it's talking about its size and volume here and hemoglobin levels. So this is run every year at your yearly physical by your MD. They run it. They don't necessarily know how to interpret it the best all the time, but the information's there for someone who can interpret it if it ever gets in front of their eyeballs. And to answer your question, when might we want to test B vitamins? Well, on this standard CBC test that's run every year, if your MCV, MCH, and MCHC are lab high, that is suggestive of low B vitamin status. And it's typically either B12, folate, or B6. And if those are high, and if these three ended up being low at the same time, that could be a macrocytic anemia or megaloblastic anemia, which is a pernicious anemia, or a B vitamin anemia, or B12 anemia, you may have heard it called before. So in that case, these results suggest your B's are low, so you could then reflex to specifically testing the serum folate, serum B12, serum B6, and see which one or more of those are low. So that's one way to do it. The serum B12, from a functional medicine perspective, is just, if it's optimal, and optimal, at least from the way I look at it, is optimal is greater than 600. We want to see it greater than 600. But it's not, you can still have B12 problems and have greater than 600. Like if you take a multivitamin with B12 in it and your doctor tests you, it might come out lab high and they say, Sue, stop taking the vitamin, your B12 is too high. Well, it might be high because you took it and it peaked and you've gone for fasted labs or whatever. Like, there's ebb and flow to the level. So just because it's high doesn't mean you're in trouble. And again, it's water soluble, so it's not going to stay high. Less than 600 suggests a functional, insufficiency, and you probably need more. A better test than serum B12 to know your B12 status is called methylmalonic acid, or MMA for short. And this is a test, you can run this in the serum or in the urine. And this is a better marker for B12 because methylmalonic acid is an organic acid that's produced after an enzymatic reaction. That's more in depth than we need to talk about here, but the point is, for methylmalonic acid to be metabolized by the body, you must have B12. So if you have low B12, then your methylmalonic acid will go lab high. Okay, so it's an inverse marker. A high result means low B12. A low result means your B12 is good. So it only matters if it's high. And this is a better test than the serum B12, but it's more expensive, so it's not as broadly run. Now, if you're having neuropathy, if you're a neuropathy patient, and that's, nerve damage type symptoms, so numbness, tingling, weakness, burning, different symptoms like that, you could have too high levels of vitamin B6. If you take too much B6, that can drive neuropathy symptoms. But there's different biochemical forms of these B vitamins, and I've talked about this in other videos, so I can link to that here for you. But vitamin B6 is called pyridoxine. Pyridoxine, sorry on the spelling. All right, so pyridoxine is vitamin B6. That's one form of it, but the best and most metabolically active form is called P5P, or pyridoxal 5-phosphate. Okay, so the reason I'm telling you this is because if your pyridoxine level is too high, that can drive neuropathy symptoms. And so if your doctor tests your serum B6 levels, they'll tell you don't take, and if they're high, they'll tell you you might have a B6 neuropathy, don't take vitamin B6. Well, if you don't have vitamin B6, you might not have the best antiviral defense like we just talked about, or you might not be able to make your natural anti-anxiety neurotransmitter GABA, which requires B6 to be made, or you may have worse migraine pain or worse menstrual pain. So you don't want to have no vitamin B6, but it is true that you don't want to have lots of pyridoxine in that case, or in any case. Really, the better one to take is P5P, or pyridoxal 5-phosphate. This is the active form, and this does not cause neuropathy. So you don't have to worry about that causing neuropathy. So that patient would just, hopefully they'd find a doctor to say, well, no, you don't have to avoid B6 at all times, just switch to a P5P product. And as the consumer, well, how the heck do I know what I'm getting? If you've got a bottle of vitamins here on the label, right? It'll say vitamin B6, and then in parentheses, it'll say a bunch of stuff, okay? In the parentheses, you'll see either pyridoxine and or P5P, and if it has both, it'll have, whichever one is listed first, there's a higher percentage of that than the one that's listed second. And so you'd want to look in the parentheses, and the person, all of us want to see P5P in the parentheses, or at least first if they're both in it. We want the P5P first or by itself. And definitely the person with neuropathy wants to see only the P5P. So those are a few examples of how do you test it, why might you test it, what are the best tests, what are the best forms, what else do you, any other questions on that, Sue?
Yeah, and does everyone need to take methylfolate and methylcobalamin?
No, despite the blogosphere. So good question. So folate here. So this boils down to two things. One, the different forms of the vitamins, and two, the different puzzles that every individual is physiologically. So first, if we talk about forms, for folate, the most common form you're going to see is folic acid, especially in vitamins that you find at Target or Walmart or GNC or that sort of thing. So I use folic acid as an indicator of that's a crappy vitamin, I don't want that one. Okay, so if you're trying to figure out, is my multivitamin or my B complex quality, just again, come back here, spin it around to the label, find folate and read the parentheses. If the parentheses says folic acid, I'd get rid of it. Why? Well, folic acid is toxic and has to be detoxified by the body, whereas methylfolate is the most metabolically active form, best form for the body. So that's what you want. Or second best would be folinic. Is it folinic acid? I believe it's folinic acid would be the, yeah, folinic acid or folinate. It's biochemistry nerdiness, but you don't want the folic acid. You want methylfolate is the best for folate. Okay, and I'll return to the second part of that question in a second. For B12 gets even more fun. B12 has, okay, so B12 cobalamin is B12, okay? But in front of the cobalamin, you're gonna have a term. It's gonna say either cyano, it's going to say hydroxy, methyl, or adenosine. So there's 4 different types of the B12. Again, the most common one you're going to see in the poor quality vitamins is cyanocobalamin. So your Targets, your Walmarts, your GNCs, and maybe even some companies that are marketing like they're healthy or high quality, and then you turn around and you see cyanocobalamin. That's actually the first one I look for, even above folic acid. If it's cyanocobalamin, don't buy it. Why? Well, cyano sounds like what? Cyanide. Okay, and so the cyano portion of that has to be detoxified because it's basically cyanide or a poison for you. All right. Methylcobalamin. So methylcobalamin is the most metabolically active form for the most amount of cells. Hydroxycobalamin is an intermediate step. So hydroxy is kind of a storage form of B12 that when the body needs more, it can convert it to a methyl form through methylation. And then adenosylcobalamin, if you've got mitochondrial issues, adenosyl is the best form for that person because adenosyl supplies the mitochondria with B12 more readily than these other 2. So again, if you don't have any of those 3 issues, then you could kind of pick any of these 3 B12s, just not cyano. There are some people, so that was the part 1 of the 2 parts. Part 1 is the different types, and then part 2 is the different people that are taking these. Okay, so since we're on the B12 still, if depending on the person that we're talking about and their makeup and their ability to methylate and things, if you go read health blogs, methylation and the MTHFR gene has been sexy for the last 3 to 5 years, because we use methylation to turn genes on and off and express the genes to make proteins and create our physiology. But if you don't methylate, if you don't have methyl forms of B12 or methylfolate, that can cause cardiovascular disease risk, dementia disease risk, depression, anxiety, mood stuff, all kinds of different issues. So the blogs all say, well, take methylfolate and take methylcobalamin. Everyone needs that. And it's not true because some people will be hurt by that. Why? In general, it's pretty safe to take those forms for everybody. But if you were someone who took it and you got worse, for example, if it's a methylcobalamin that you're taking, you may already be a hypermethylator. So adding more methyl form to your body might make your anxiety or depression or cognitive stuff worse. And so that person would actually be better to do a hydroxy form. And in that way, they're providing their body with the B12, but in the hydroxy form that is more storage form. So as their body needs it, that it can convert it as needed. So the wisdom of the body will do it instead of piling it in this way. That person could also choose to take the adenosine instead as well. So again, it's probably the answer that I give most common that annoys you, but it depends on the person we're talking about as to which form should they take. And hopefully this informed you a little bit towards figuring that out for yourself. But again, it would be, for most people, it'll be safe to take the methylated forms. And for most people, I would argue probably all people, it's going to be better to take the methylated forms than the cyano or the folic acid form.